Hopefully I got this digital camera lined up perfectly. Acting like I'm on a movie set. But welcome everybody to a special Yu-Gi-Oh 101 video. One that I planned on doing a lot earlier than this, but better late than never, right? This video will be called Humble Beginnings, My Experiences, or something along the lines of that. I haven't really finalized what the title is going to be. Like with a lot of my videos, I don't really know what I'm going to name them. Like a lot of videos like this, I don't really know what I'm going to name them until like the last minute, so that remains to be seen. But the reason why I'm doing this video is because over the years of me doing my Yu-Gi-Oh 101 series on this channel, you know, I've been asked, multiple times, how did I develop this talent, or, how do I get good at being able to deck build without relying on some online deck profile, things along the lines of that. And this video is basically to take a journey back to when I first got started in Yu-Gi-Oh, me going back to me getting my first taste of Yu-Gi-Oh, so to speak. And this is also going to be pretty fun for me because I haven't thought this far back in quite some time. And without further ado, let's get started. This camera has like a 30-minute time limit before it stops, and I don't want to have a video that long on YouTube of me just ranting, of me just talking. But yeah. But to take it back to when I first got started with Yu-Gi-Oh, I can't remember whether or not it was I knew of the show first or whether I knew of this game. At the time, I had me a Game Boy Color, and this was back when Pokemon Gold was out, back when I was into Pokemon like that. And it was like this bundle with Pokemon Gold and like a Game Boy Color back then. I still have that Game Boy Color around here somewhere, but but yeah, that was around that time. Somehow I came across another Game Boy Color game. It was called YuGiOh Dark Duel Stories, if I'm not mistaken. Matter of fact, let me pull up this online list of games. Matter of fact, it was only one game. Like, I'm looking at it right now. It was only one game on the Game Boy Color, so I'm guessing that was it, because I know that was the game that I was playing. It was only one Yu-Gi-Oh game I was playing, but that's when I got my first taste in Yu-Gi-Oh. It was sometime around the same time I started watching the show, I believe, and I came across Dark Duel Stories, but I don't know if I got into the game first or the show first, but it was sometime around that, it was sometime around that time that I came across the game, and for some reason I was just interested in it. And I don't think I was watching the show first. I don't know, man. But I came across the game, and when I first started playing it, I was really hooked on it. I don't know why, but I was just hooked. Maybe it was the card artwork that got to me. Maybe it was I don't know. It was just interesting to me at the time. And in Dark Duel Stories, they had this thing called, now forgive me if I get this wrong, because I don't know how long has the Game Boy Color been out, and how long has it been since I, played that. It's been years, so of course I won't get everything like 100% accurate. But I believe in the game, it was this thing called a deck volume limit. And basically, like, what the deck volume limit was, it was this, like, each card in the game had a certain number of deck volume points. And I believe, like, the more duels you played, the higher your deck volume limit went to. So basically, it was like the more cards you use. So let's say, for example, cards like Celtic Guardian that had like 5 deck volume points to it, and cards like the Dark Magician had like 25 deck volume points to it, and things like that. And your deck volume limit would be like 200. You would have to find a way to construct a build without going over that limit. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to use the build. But this is how I got my first taste in Yu-Gi-Oh! And this is how that talent for me, you know, getting into researching cards and looking for things that possibly I probably wouldn't have normally did, considering that I just started the game and I was just trying to get just really get a hang of it. So really from the get-go, I was kind of pushed in this direction, you know, from the games that I played, to research cards and try to find other cards that could work in a build. And I remember some years after that, I ended up getting me a Game Boy Advance. And the second Yu-Gi-Oh game I got, I believe it was called 7 Trials to Glory. Now this is when that strategy of mine really starts to kick in, and this is when I really begin to get really creative with the builds that I was making. At first, I just was using the starter decks in games like Dark Duel Stories. But in Dark Duel Stories, I had noticed something that, you know, at the time, like they started, well, around this time, like this is when they first began, it was around that time that in Yu-Gi-Oh, yeah, matter of fact, it was around that time in Yu-Gi-Oh that they started doing this thing called the Big City Tournament, and basically, like, what the rules of it was that that monsters with level 5 and up would require tributes. And I remember at first I didn't like that. You know, I didn't like the fact that I had to wait to get monsters on the field, because you got to understand, for all of the new people that just got started playing Yu-Gi-Oh, I would say about like 5 years ago, like within like the past 5 years, 5-6 years, you guys really don't, you guys really wouldn't understand, like, you know, like where I'm coming from in terms of how slow the game was back then, because you guys came into the game when everything was like, you know, fast paced, you know, like you could do all these searches and get all these special summons off and things like that. You have to understand that back then, the only searches you really had were cards like Sangan and the Witch of the Black Forest. That was basically it. You know, that's all you really had to search anything with. And for the majority, like literally, like 99% of the game, unless you was using like, well, fuck it, I would go as far as even saying 100% of the game, you were basically at the mercy of like dead draw. And what that means is you had to wait until you drew the card during your turn in your draw phase, hoping that you got the card that you know, needed. So every draw had to really count. And this is one of the things that I noticed in Dark Duel Stories. And I didn't want to waste a turn me drawing a card that I needed to tribute something for, and I didn't have the monsters on the field to do it. So when I noticed this, I started creating builds that had low level, high attack power. And these are like normal monsters that had low level, high attacks. And I remember one of my first early builds where I was using low level normal. I have to emphasize on that, normal, like low level normal monsters that had like 1900 attack and like 1800 attack at first. So I'm talking about guys like La Jin, the Mystical Genie of the Lamp, cards like Gemini Elf, also cards like Vorsh Raider and things like that. And I also started using cards like Man-Eater Bug and Old Vindictive Magician, but I don't think that was out back then. I think Old Vindictive Magician didn't become a card until sometime after that game. But Man-Eater Bug was one of the cards I remember using. And earliest, like early on, I did not use spell cards at all. That's one thing to note. I did not use spell cards at all. Unless it was like Monster Reborn or maybe even like Dark Hole, I did not use I did not use spell cards. I thought that they were some of the most useless cards in the game at the time, and I did not like them. So at first my build was nothing but low level, high attack, normal monsters, man-eater bugs, and a bunch of traps that could take out my opponent's monsters. It's cards like the um, original Trap Hole. Cards like that. Cards like the original Trap Hole. Magic Cylinder. Well, even though that doesn't take out, you know, my opponent's monsters, it does do some burn damage to them. Cards like Mirror Force. And I think that was about it. Cards like that. Cards like Negate Attack. Cards like that. So this is what my deck consisted of at first. And sometime after that, when the Game Boy Advance came out and I got my hands on 7 Trials of Glory, I was still using that same build, and then Old Vindictive Magician became a card, and that's when I started coming across cards like the Harpy's Feather Duster and things like that, and I started using that more. So it was 3 spell cards I was using. I was using Dark Hole, Harpy's Feather Duster, and as well as Dark Hole. I had to think about that for a minute, and I was still thinking that, you know, trap cards were trap cards were like the better card, and I still thought for the majority of the time that spell cards were really useless. It wasn't until I kept coming across this card, and forgive me if I get this name wrong because I never knew how to pronounce it right, Grin Maju Aiza. And this is a monster card that is, I believe, level 3, and it has an effect that that it gains 400 attack and defense for each of your cards that have been removed from play. And, well, removed from play, that just was what they were calling, you know, something like banished back then. And the more I came across that card, the more I wanted to use it. It was just something that was just telling me, you know, just pay attention to this card. It was something in my conscience that just kept telling me to pay attention to it. So eventually I decided to make a build based on that card, and I think, if I'm not mistaken, this isn't the exact deck recipe of that build, but this is the closest thing to the earliest version of that. And I had called it Lost Power Source. Because in the game, one thing I noticed was that the computer, they never used this space that was above the graveyard. And I don't know if you can see that too good. But yeah, that was pretty much it right there. Man, it was a pretty effective build at the time, because like I said, like, the game was slow. They still didn't have cards like Elemental Hero, cards like the Elemental Heroes, so you were still at the mercy of like dead draw and things like that. So you really had to make every draw count. So I put that in the back of my head that anytime I drew a card, I wanted to make sure that I had a card that was worth playing or worth putting in play. Either it was going to take out your monster, or it was going to be a trap card that I could get rid of, you know, your monsters with. And all of this was just leading to me putting cards into the graveyard and using cards like Soul Release to get them banished. And me just digging deep through cards like that, that's really how I got my start in Yu-Gi-Oh! In terms of me building decks and things like that. And I kind of wish I still had that original deck recipe. It's somewhere in this house, in a notebook somewhere. I know I still have it. I never threw it away. And eventually I will come across it again, and maybe then I'll, have it for you guys to see. So I do think that's one of those things that I held on to all the way back. When I first really got into Yu-Gi-Oh! Like that. It's still around here somewhere, and I'm pretty sure I'll find it. But yeah, that was pretty much how I got my first start in Yu-Gi-Oh! And how I developed that passion to really research cards and see what is out there that people aren't even paying attention to, and try to bring some attention to it. But yeah, man, that's my earliest memories of me developing this talent of deck building without you having to use some online profile. I was pretty much not exposed to the official Yu-Gi-Oh! Community until I would say around 2005, 2011, sometime in between that time. I know it was around the time when Yu-Gi-Oh! GX came out, and which I believe was in like 2005, that I just quit playing the game altogether. And I started buying cards, but there wasn't any like local, areas where I could go to, duel with people. I remember like one duel that I had. It was with somebody at my local library, and he was in there with his other friends, and he was playing like Magic the Gathering, and I to this day still don't know how to play Magic. I guess maybe that's something I'm gonna get into one day. But yeah, Yu-Gi-Oh! Has always been one of those games where I try to come across people that really want to stand out. And for those people, I say that, you are the last shred of originality in this game, because during these days when, like originality is basically dead or very little, you have to realize that this game needs people like you. When you see the same thing over and over again, and I said it before, and I'm gonna say it one more time. People get mad at me when I do my weekly fan day events, and at times I have been known to just quit when going up against certain builds. I have this thing where if you've seen it already and you know how it works, then what's the point of even watching it? It's boring at that point when you know what to expect. Like when you figured out everything about it, you're like, okay, well, I already know that they're going to do this, they're going to do this, they're going to do this. It's just like, maybe using the cards, maybe they're fun, but watching those duels online in like a video, that's not interesting anymore. Oh, look, another E-Dragon build is going up against another Elemental Hero build. Whoopee. You know what I mean? And it's really just one of those moments that I try to avoid. And I'm glad I developed this talent and I was introduced in Yu-Gi-Oh! The way that I was, because I don't think I would be making the builds that I'm making. And I probably acting like one of them, those type of pros that act like they're so holier than thou, and they really don't know anything about the game. I'm pretty sure you've come across those type of guys like that. um, in on sites like Yu-Gi-Oh Pro as well as Dueling Network that act like they know so much about the game when they wait till the OCG to come out with a deck profile and then they mimic that and try to run with it, you know. But yeah, man, that's my earliest memories of me getting into Yu-Gi-Oh, and that's how I developed this talent of being able to build my decks. I even did a 3 video series of me building a deck completely from scratch so that you guys can get an idea as to how I go about searching for cards and things like that. I'm gonna have to find those videos. I think I put it in a playlist and you guys can find it on my channel. If not, I'm gonna go look for those videos myself and I'm gonna find out and I'm gonna have that deck playlist on my channel. But with that being said, man, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and I hope I inspired somebody in some way to get interested in just researching cards and you know, trying to bring that hint of originality that a lot of people, not just myself, have said has gone missing in Yu-Gi-Oh. You know, you don't have to look at an online deck profile to make a consistent build, and that's basically what it is here. So, with that being said, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. I hope this answered any questions that you guys have had about. Forgive me, I'm looking at TV. There's a movie playing on Toonami called Akira, and it's pretty good. But not to get too sidetracked. But yeah, man, that's pretty much it. And I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Until then, peace. See you soon.